Welcome back to another cooking video. Today I'm going to show you how to make a beautiful, delicious steak sushi roll. Now I'm going to use a matured piece of beef for this. It's going to be dry aged for 50 days, which is going to give it a lot more flavor and a lot more tenderness. Now I'm also going to cook it sous vide at 60 degrees Celsius. Usually I would cook a piece of beef like this a bit lower to get a little bit under medium, but I'm going to cook it a little bit over medium to get a bit of a sort of roast beefy kind of texture. Because I want to give the sushi roll a little bit more texture since I'm using caramelized onions, which are very mushy. So, if you don't have a sous vide machine, you can still cook this recipe. You just have to cook your meat in a pan, and then it won't be exactly the same, but it will be very similar and still pretty good. Okay, let's get going. Let's cook this. Okay, let's start off by making some sushi rice. This is 600 milliliters of washed sushi rice, so I've washed it until the water goes clear. And then this is 660 milliliters of water plus some kombu, and then I'm going to turn the rice cooker on to rice mode. This is a really cool rice cooker. You should get one of these if you don't have it. I'll link in the description. Yeah, it makes a funny jingle when it starts. Also, check out my sushi rice recipe on my website where I'll go more into detail into how to make sushi rice. It'll be in the link in the description. Now, this is the beef. This is 50 days dry aged beef, and there's a bone here. And we're going to remove that bone and try to cut as close as possible to the bone. Now it may look like we're wasting a lot of meat here, but we're not, because the bone has quite a good thickness and it's got a little bit of curvature, so it's really against the bone there. Anyway, let's just cut it off the bone, rip it off here, and then we're going to use this fat. Now we're going to remove this and we're going to render it down later. This is great fat to use because dry aged fat has the flavor of dry aged beef and it really gives it a massive flavor. So do not throw this away. Keep this in a bag in the fridge or freezer and use it and render it down whenever you want to cook some beef. We're going to use it later in this video. The main part of the meat is a bit too wide. I'm going to cut it in half to make a sort of saku block of like the same that we do with sashimi when we use tuna or salmon or whatever. You want to have it at about a width of your hand so that you can later cut it into slices. Now I'm going to season it on both sides with salt, and then after a little bit of pepper. So just take some pepper, crunch it over it. Great. Now we're going to sous vide it. So once you're finished with the seasoning, you can place these into your sous vide bags. Now I'm just going to take it, slide it in there. Alright, now that it's in, we're going to remove all the air. So this is the vacuum sealer for sous vide machines. You just close it in there, press the button, and it removes the air, and once it does that, then it seals the bag. So look at that go. Okay, I always double seal my bag so that there's no mistakes or errors. Now this is the sous vide machine I'm using. This is a Sous Vide Supreme. It's a standalone unit. And I'm just going to place it in a 60 degrees Celsius with a bit over medium. But if you want, you can do 55 if you want a little bit under medium. Now, here I'm going to remove the rice since it's cooked. And then I'm going to take off the kombu and finish seasoning the rice. Now, like I said before, you can check out my rice recipe on my website or on another YouTube video I have. I'll link them in the description below. Now basically I'm just adding the vinegar season mix and I'm cutting the rice to spread the vinegar mix across and also cool down the rice. And after some cutting, some turning around and some resting, then I'm going to push it to one side of the hangiri. This is the special wooden bowl we use for this. And then I'm going to just leave it there until I need it. So I'm going to place a damp, wet towel over it. This will keep it nice and moist. Now, moving on, asparagus. Cut the bottoms off, place it into the steamer for 8 minutes, and then into ice cold water to stop the cooking. Now, pear, peel it, and then you're going to slice it in half, and then we're going to slice it in half again and just remove the cores by cutting at a 45-degree angle, and then we're going to slice it into a rough dice. So just chop it like this, and then just chop it the other way. You can take your time with this. The point is just to have little cubes of pear. Now you're going to add this into a bowl, and then you're going to add 1 to 2 teaspoons of rough mustard, that's the one with the seeds, and a little pinch of salt. Mix it around and give it a little taste. Make sure it's just right. Okay, now the sushi roll. Take 100 grams of cooked and seasoned sushi rice and spread it out over your half a sheet of nori. Now you want to leave a little gap of about 1 centimeter at the top, and then you're going to want to flip it over And then you add a little bit of wasabi with your finger. Then we're going to take some caramelized onions and just spread it across. Now if you confuse this point and think where these caramelized onions come from, you're probably right. This is from our last video where I showed how to make 4-hour caramelized onions. If you haven't seen that, check that out. There'll be a link in the description, and it's a great video and you'll need it to make this recipe. Now, place your asparagus on there and then you're going to roll. So roll forwards and over and close it before you reach the end of the nori. Then you're going to push forwards and close again, and you're forming it into a cube or square shape. And then roll forwards again. And here we're going to move it to the sides and then just tap the edges so that it evens out the end so that you don't have a rough end. Now, we're going to move on to cooking the meat. So we're going to take the sous vide meat out, and you're going to need to render the fat. Now you should render the fat before you make the sushi roll, because this process here takes about 15 minutes. You put it at a low heat and you just slowly let it melt, and it just takes time to release that fat out of the little cube of fat. So just render it down, and then you're going to use the fat at high heat to cook the outside of the steak. Remember, the inside of the steak's already cooked, so you don't need to cook it. You're just trying to create a nice crust on the outside. And we're using the rendered fat because it adds a lot more taste than, say, butter. Try to get a nice crust on all sides of your steak, since sous vide meat, when it comes out of the sous vide machine, does not look very appetizing, so it needs to have that caramelized, cooked crust on the outside. Okay, so now that the outside of the steak is nice and brown, we're going to cut it. So just take it out the pan, and then you're going to take a sashimi knife and just slice it at a 45-degree angle, like sashimi slices, and try to go through it in a single motion, just like you would with sashimi. But it is a bit more tough than fish, so take your time with it. And then you're going to layer these on top of your sushi roll, just like this. Then we place some cling film over it, press down. Okay, I'm just tightening the edges again, just to make sure it's all good. And now we're going to cut it. So, you're going to take your sharp knife, wet it, and then we're going to cut the sushi roll in half, then the halves into quarters, and then the quarters into eighths to make 8 pieces of sushi. And then just press it again just in case anything moved while you were cutting it. And then just remove that cling film. And boom, look at that. We've got our sushi roll pieces. Now we just need to plate them and top them. So we're going to place them on this beautiful glass plate. I think 4 pieces of sushi is enough on here. You don't need to put the whole 8 on this plate. For presentation, it looks nice like this. Okay, so here I'm just putting that pear mustard on top. And there we go. We've got a beautiful piece of dry aged steak sushi. And now for the very best part, you get to try what you've just made. So I'm going to take a piece of sushi here and just dip it slightly into some soy sauce. And now I'm going to take a big bite. That caramelized onion with that pear, that mustard, and that aged beef. A little bit of asparagus. Delicious. Now, I hope you give this a try at home and try this creation for yourself. If you want the beef a little bit less cooked, you can put it to 54 degrees or 55 degrees. The sous vide machine, and you'll have a little bit medium rare. I like this play of textures where it's a little bit more tough instead of having it a little bit too soft, let's say. So that's just something to think about. Okay.